6:15 on a Sunday morning, and I'm walking down to my dock with Grandpa's old fishing rod. The air smells like diesel fuel and swamp water, thick enough to taste. I've done this walk maybe 1,000 times in my 57 years. Same creaky boards under my feet, same view of the lake that's been in my family since before I was born. That's when I see them. Two blonde women in matching homeowners association vests, sitting in a motorboat right across my inlet, blocking my path to open water like they own the place. The bigger one, maybe 49, stands up and waves a piece of paper over her head like she's flagging down a rescue helicopter. Sir, fishing is prohibited by Homeowners Association Order Number 247B. Her voice carries across the water with all the authority of someone who's never been told no. Her sister, thinner but dressed identical, starts snapping photos with her phone. Click, click, click. Building a case against me before I've even wet my line. I reach into my jacket pocket and squeeze the old brass medallion Grandpa left me. Lakekeeper 1967, it says. Funny how a piece of metal can feel so heavy when everything around you starts feeling fake. Ma'am, I've been fishing this lake since before you were born. What order? The bigger one, let's call her Karen one, waves that paper again. It looks fresh, too fresh. Like it was printed this morning specifically for this moment. Her sister keeps taking pictures, documenting my crime from every angle. This is private waterway now, managed by the Homeowners Association. You need permits. I've heard a lot of lies in my time. Been married, been divorced, been in business for myself. But this has the particular stink of bureaucratic nonsense designed to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Since when? Since the vote last month. Didn't you get the notice? The only notice I got last month was my property tax bill and a flyer for Joe's Pizza. But here's the thing about liars. They always have an answer ready. Too ready. Karen, too, stops taking pictures long enough to pull out her phone and make a call. Not to her husband or her mother. This is business. Jake? Yeah, we need you down at the South Inlet. We've got a violator. Jake? Who the hell is Jake? 20 minutes later, I find out. Jake turns out to be maybe 25 years old, wearing what looks like a sheriff's uniform ordered from a costume website. No badge number I can see. No radio. No real authority in his eyes, just the nervous energy of someone playing dress-up. Sir, I'm going to need you to hand over that fishing equipment. On whose authority? Homeowners Association Enforcement. You're in violation of Waterway Protection Ordinance 247B. He reaches for my rod like he's confiscating evidence at a crime scene. Grandpa's rod, the one that caught my first fish when I was 8 years old. The one that caught dinner when times were tough. The one that was supposed to catch my grandson's first fish someday. I let him take it, not because I have to, but because I want to see how far this performance goes. You'll be receiving a citation in the mail, $500 fine. First offense. First offense. Like, there's a whole system built around this. Like, they've been planning this for months. By now, neighbors are gathering. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down. Old Bill Morris, probably wondering what the commotion is about. The Hendersons with their coffee mugs, watching like it's dinner theater. And they're all looking at me like I'm the problem. Jake, the fake cop, walks back to the sisters' boat with my fishing rod. They motor away like they've just saved the environment from public enemy number 1. The neighbors start drifting back to their morning routines, probably wondering why Tom Harris can't just follow the rules like everyone else. I stand there on my dock, holding that brass medallion, watching my family's fishing rod disappear across water that's been free since before any of us were born. That's when I realize this isn't about fishing at all. If you're watching Karenology, you know these things are never really about what they seem to be about. There's always something underneath, something that makes perfect sense once you see the whole picture. But right then, standing on my dock empty-handed, I had no idea how deep this thing went. The brass medallion felt warm in my palm as I walked back to the house, trying to make sense of what just happened. 25 years I've lived on this lake, never needed permission to fish my own water before today. My phone was ringing before I made it to the kitchen. Tom, you see what happened at the lake? It was Bill Morris, my neighbor 3 doors down. His voice had that shaky quality it gets when he's been drinking, which lately was most mornings before 10. I was there, Bill, front row seat. They got some kind of emergency meeting called for 2 o'clock. Homeowners Association. Everyone's supposed to come. Emergency meeting, 2 hours after they confiscated my fishing rod. That's either remarkable timing or remarkable planning. I made coffee and tried to think. The Karen sisters, that's what I was calling them now. They had this thing choreographed like a Broadway show. The matching outfits, the fresh paperwork, the fake cop ready to go. You don't pull something like that together overnight. The medallion sat on my kitchen counter, catching the morning light. Lake Keeper 1967. Grandpa earned that working for the county back when they actually cared about keeping the waterways clean and accessible. Back when public meant public. 12:30, I'm walking into the community center and the place is packed. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows, maybe 40 people, all buzzing with the kind of nervous energy that comes before someone gets thrown under the bus. Karen 1 and Karen 2 are up front, sitting at a card table like they're running a school board meeting, still wearing those matching vests, still looking like they've never had a moment's doubt about anything in their lives. I take a seat in the back, old habit from my army days. Always know where the exits are. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Karen 1 says, standing up with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. We're here today because of a serious violation of our waterway protection policies. She's looking right at me when she says it, not pointing, not calling me out directly, but making sure everyone knows who the villain is in this story. As you all know, we voted last month to implement stricter controls on our lake access, for environmental protection, for property values, for the safety of our children. Funny thing about that vote, I don't remember getting a ballot, don't remember seeing it posted anywhere, don't remember anyone asking my opinion about turning a public lake into their private playground. Mrs. Patterson raises her hand. Sweet lady, taught 3rd grade for 30 years. What exactly did Mr. Harris do wrong? Unauthorized fishing in a protected waterway, despite clear notification of the new policies. Clear notification. There it is again. The lie that sounds so reasonable, you almost want to believe it. Karen 2 stands up now, playing her supporting role. We have photographic evidence, timestamps, witness statements. They're building a case like this is going to court, like $500 and a confiscated fishing rod isn't enough, like they want to make an example that'll scare everyone else into line. I propose we vote, Karen 1 says, to suspend Mr. Harris's water access privileges pending full compliance with the association guidelines. Suspend my water access to the lake I've lived on for 25 years, to the water where I scattered my wife's ashes 3 years ago, to the place where my grandson was supposed to learn to fish next summer. Hands go up around the room. Not all of them, but enough. Mrs. Patterson keeps her hands folded in her lap, looking uncomfortable. Bill Morris stares at the floor like he's studying the carpet pattern. A few others shift in their seats, but they don't speak up. The vote passes, 26-14. Just like that, I'm cut off from the water that borders my own property. Just like that, 40 people decide I'm the problem that needs solving. The fine stands at $500, Karen 1 announces, checking something off on her clipboard, plus a $2,000 assessment for waterway restoration and ecosystem recovery. $2,000? For what? For throwing a line in the water where my family's been fishing since before these women were born? Additionally, all water activities will require pre-approval and appropriate permits going forward. Applications are available through the association office. I stand up. 40 pairs of eyes follow me as I walk toward the door. Nobody says anything. Nobody asks if this seems right to them. But just before I reach the exit, Mrs. Patterson's voice stops me. Tom, what kind of fish were you trying to catch? I turn around. She's looking at me with those kind teacher eyes, like she's giving me a chance to explain myself to the class. That same kind I've been catching for 25 years, Mrs. Patterson. The kind that don't need permission. The community center went dead quiet. Karen 1's pen stopped moving on her clipboard. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. That's when I realized they weren't just taking my fishing rights. They were taking everything. Walking home from that meeting felt like walking through a graveyard. Every neighbor I passed looked away. Windows that usually had friendly faces now had drawn curtains. 25 years of morning waves and borrowed tools, gone in one afternoon vote. I sat on my back porch that evening, staring at the lake that was apparently no longer mine to enjoy. The brass medallion sat heavy in my palm. Lake Keeper, 1967. What would Grandpa think about permits to fish public water? Monday morning, I decided to fight back the obvious way. Called the county courthouse. Asked to speak to someone about waterway regulations. Got transferred 3 times before landing with a clerk who sounded like she was reading from a script. Sir, if the homeowners association has jurisdiction over that waterway, there's not much the county can do. Since when do they have jurisdiction? I'd need to research that. Could take a few weeks. Few weeks. By then, I'd either pay their fines or lose my house fighting them in the court. Perfect bureaucratic timing. That afternoon, I drove to the law office downtown. Frank Wheeler, been practicing here since before cell phones existed. His waiting room smells like old coffee and older carpet. But he knows property law like most people know their own names. Tom, good to see you. What brings you by? I laid out the whole story. The boat ambush, the fake cop, the emergency vote, the fines. Frank listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad that looked like it survived the Civil War. Here's the thing, he said when I finished. Fighting a homeowners association is like wrestling a pig. You both get muddy, but the pig enjoys it. So I'm supposed to just take this? I'm saying it'll cost you more than $2,500 to fight it, and that's if you win. Frank pulled out a calculator older than my truck and started punching numbers. Legal fees, filing costs, depositions, expert witnesses. By the time he finished, we were looking at maybe $15,000 for a case that might drag on for 2 years. Course, there is another way, he said, leaning back in his chair. Sometimes the best defense is a good investigation. What kind of investigation? The kind where you find out what they're really up to. Because, Tom, I've been doing this for 32 years. Nobody goes to this much trouble over fishing rights unless there's something bigger at stake. That evening, I called every neighbor I could think of who might talk straight with me. Most didn't answer. The ones who did gave me the polite brush off. Sorry, Tom, but we have to live here too. Bill Morris was different. He invited me over for a beer, but when I got there, he was already 3 drinks ahead of me. They got something planned, Tom. I seen them boats out there every morning this week, taking measurements, writing stuff down. What kind of measurements? The kind with those little machines on tripods. And they got some guy in a suit comes by every few days. Not from around here. Bill's hands were shaking when he reached for his bottle. He'd been a steady drinker for years, but this was different. This was fear. There's something else, he said, looking around his kitchen like someone might be listening. My nephew Jake, the one they had playing cop yesterday? My blood went cold. Your nephew? Yeah. They paid him $200 to wear that uniform and take your fishing rod. Told him it was for a neighborhood watch demonstration. The pieces started clicking together like tumblers in a lock. The matching outfits, the fresh paperwork, the perfectly timed emergency meeting. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Bill, what else do you know? I know they ain't done with you, and I know whatever they're measuring out there on the water, it ain't about fish. He finished his beer and opened another one, his hands steadier now that he'd said what he came to say. And Tom, that vote yesterday, half those people never even got notices about the meeting. They just showed up because the Karens went door to door that morning, telling folks there was some kind of emergency. Door to door, emergency, no official notices. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a yellow legal pad of my own, trying to piece together what I knew. The Karen sisters had orchestrated the whole thing like a military operation. But why? What was worth going to all this trouble to keep one old man from fishing? I looked out at the lake, dark and still under the moonlight. Somewhere out there was the answer, somewhere in those measurements and mysterious meetings and boat trips at dawn. The medallion caught the kitchen light one more time. Lake Keeper, 1967. Maybe it was time to start keeping watch again. But first, I needed to find out what they were really measuring. Tuesday morning, 5:30. I made coffee in the dark and positioned myself at my kitchen window with an old pair of binoculars from my hunting days. If they were taking measurements, I wanted to see what they were measuring. 6:15, right on schedule, that same motorboat comes puttering across the lake. But this time, it's not the Karen sisters. It's 2 men in orange vests with equipment I didn't recognize. They anchor about 50 yards from my dock and start setting up something that looks like a surveyor's transit. They work for maybe an hour, taking readings, making notes, moving to different spots around the inlet, professional, methodical, expensive. Nobody surveys water for fishing regulations. Around 8, they pack up and head back toward the marina. I waited 10 minutes, then walked down to my dock to see if they'd left any clues behind. No markers, no flags, nothing obvious. But the grass near the water's edge looked trampled in places, like they'd been taking measurements on land too. That afternoon, I drove to the courthouse myself. Sometimes you get better answers when you show up in person instead of calling. The clerk at the property records desk was maybe 25, with the kind of helpful attitude that comes from being new on the job. Her nameplate read, Jessica. "I need to see any recent filings involving Lakeshore Drive," I told her. "What kind of filings?" "Anything. Property transfers, easements, development permits, last 6 months. Jessica disappeared into the back room and came out 20 minutes later with a thin folder that didn't look like much, until I opened it. 3 documents. The first was a filing from something called Lakeshore Development LLC, requesting a feasibility study for commercial waterfront development. The second was an environmental impact assessment application for the same property. The third was a preliminary permit for boat dock expansion and water taxi services. Water taxi services, on a lake that maybe sees 20 boats on a busy weekend. "Jessica, who's behind Lakeshore Development LLC?" She pulled up something on her computer, squinting at the screen. "Looks like it's registered to..." She paused, double-checking. "Karen McGrath and Karen Bennett. The sisters, using their real names on legal documents while playing environmental protection games with the neighbors. What's the timeline on these applications?" "Filed 3 months ago, still under review." 3 months ago, right around the time they would have started planning their fishing prohibition campaign. I thanked Jessica and walked back to my truck with those documents, feeling like I'd just found the smoking gun, but when I got home and read through them again, the picture got more complicated. The development they were proposing wasn't just boat docks and taxi services, it was a full commercial waterfront facility, restaurant, gift shop, rental equipment, guided tours. They wanted to turn our quiet lake into a tourist destination. And the only thing standing in their way was people like me who already had legal access to the water. That evening, I called Frank Wheeler again. "It's Frank, what if I told you those homeowners association fines weren't about fishing at all?" "I'd say you're probably right. What did you find?" I told him about the documents, the surveying, the development company with the Karen sisters' names on it. Frank listened without interrupting, but I could hear him taking notes. "Tom, this changes everything. If they're trying to clear existing residents from water access to make way for commercial development, that's a whole different kind of legal problem. The kind I can fight? The kind you can win. But we need more evidence. We need to know exactly what they're planning and how they're planning to pull it off." After I hung up, I sat on my porch with a beer and watched the lake. Peaceful as always, with just the sound of water lapping against my dock and the occasional fish jumping. Hard to imagine it crowded with tour boats and strangers taking selfies. But peace doesn't pay legal bills, and if Karen McGrath and Karen Bennett thought they could scare me away from my own property with fake cops and phony regulations, they'd pick the wrong old man to mess with. The brass medallion felt warm in my pocket. Lake Keeper, 1967. Maybe that job wasn't finished after all. Wednesday morning, I was back at my kitchen window with the binoculars when my phone rang. "Mr. Harris, this is Rick Stone from Stone Construction. I understand you might have some questions about work being done around your lake." I'd never heard of Rick Stone or Stone Construction. "What kind of work?" "The kind the McGrath sisters don't want you to know about. Meet me at Murphy's Bar tonight at 7. Come alone." The line went dead. Either I was about to get some answers or I was about to walk into another trap. But after 3 days of fake cops and secret filings and early morning surveillance, I was ready for either one. Murphy's Bar sits on the edge of town, like it's been there since before anyone remembers. Dark wood, dim lights, and the kind of bartender who minds his own business. 7 o'clock sharp, I'm nursing a beer at a corner table when a guy about 40 walks in, scanning the room like he's looking for trouble. Rick Stone turned out to be smaller than his voice suggested. Weathered hands, work boots, the kind of tan that comes from actual labor instead of golf courses. He slid into the booth across from me and ordered whiskey, neat. "You're the fishing guy," he said. Statement, not a question. Depends who's asking. Rick laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Fair enough, I'm the contractor who's been doing work for the McGrath sisters, or was until 3 days ago. What kind of work? It's survey stakes, soil samples, measuring water depth at different points around the lake. They told me it was for environmental monitoring. He finished his whiskey and signaled for another. His hands had a slight tremor that reminded me of Bill Morris. But environmental monitoring doesn't need boat slips measured out, doesn't need parking area layouts, doesn't need septic system capacity calculations for a 100-seat restaurant. 100 seats. They weren't thinking small. What changed 3 days ago? I started asking questions about permits, about zoning, about whether the neighbors knew what was coming. Karen McGrath didn't like my questions. Rick reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table like we were making a drug deal. Site plans, construction timeline, profit projections, everything they didn't want you to see. I opened the envelope carefully. The papers inside made my stomach drop. Phase 1. Eliminate existing water access through homeowners association regulations. Timeline. Complete by end of current month. Phase 2. Begin commercial dock construction and land clearing. Timeline. Begin following month. Phase 3. Grand opening of Lakeshore Adventure Resort and Marina. Timeline, 6 months. They had it all planned out. Every detail, every timeline, every dollar they expected to make. And buried in the middle of Phase 1 was a line that made my blood run cold. Pending resolution of Harris property access dispute. Rick, they're not just trying to stop me from fishing. They're trying to force me to sell. Gets better. Look at page 4. Page 4 was a property acquisition list. My house was third on the list, with a notation. Hold out property. Recommend escalated pressure tactics if standard HOA approach fails. Escalated pressure tactics. I'd been in the Army long enough to know what that meant. Why are you showing me this? Rick finished his second whiskey and looked around the bar like he was checking for familiar faces. Because they offered me the construction contract for the whole project. $15,000 up front, another $25,000 when it's finished. All I had to do was keep my mouth shut about the real timeline. And I got a daughter starting college next year. $15,000 would solve a lot of problems. He was wrestling with something. I could see it in his face, the same look I'd seen in a lot of good men who got put in bad situations. But here's the thing, he continued. My dad built half the houses in this county. Honest work, fair prices, treating people right. He'd roll over in his grave if he knew I was helping someone steal their neighbor's home. I studied Rick Stone across that dim bar table. Either he was the best liar I'd ever met, or he was trying to do the right thing in a situation that didn't have many right answers. What do you need from me? Nothing. But what you need from me is proof that this whole homeowners association thing is a scam, and I can give you that proof. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. I took these yesterday before they fired me, original surveyor's maps from 1987 when the neighborhood was built. The photos showed property boundaries, easements, and water access rights. According to the original maps, every house on Lakeshore Drive had guaranteed access to the lake. It was written into the original development agreement. Those HOA regulations they're using against you, they violate the original property covenants. Every homeowner on this lake has legal water access that can't be taken away by association vote. Why didn't anyone know this? Because nobody keeps 40-year-old paperwork lying around, and because the McGrath sisters were counting on that. Rick stood up, leaving a 20 on the table. There's one more thing. That emergency meeting where they voted to suspend your water access? What about it? Half the people who voted don't even live on the lake. Karen McGrath bussed in her sister's friends from across town, told them it was about neighborhood security. The room started spinning a little bit. Fake cops, fake votes, fake emergencies. How many laws had they broken putting this together? Rick, I need those original maps. They're yours, but Tom? He paused at the edge of the booth. Watch your back. The McGrath sisters didn't put this much planning into a $40,000 phishing scam. They're playing for keeps. After he left, I sat in that bar for another hour, looking through the papers he'd given me. The scope of their plan was breathtaking and terrifying. They weren't just stealing my fishing rights, They were stealing my home, my neighbors' homes, and 40 years of community history. But now I had proof. Now I had evidence. Now I had a fighting chance. The question was, what were they planning to do when they realized I wasn't going to just roll over and take it? I had a feeling I was about to find out. Thursday morning, I'm making coffee when I hear the sound of heavy machinery coming down Lakeshore Drive. Through my kitchen window, I see a county code enforcement truck parked in my driveway, and a man in a clipboard and hard hat walking around my property like he's planning to tear it down. I grab my coffee and walk outside. "Morning, something I can help you with?" The inspector looks up from his clipboard, young guy, maybe 30, with the nervous energy of someone who's been given a job he doesn't particularly want to do. "Code enforcement inspection, Mr. Harris. We've received complaints about potential violations on your property." "What kind of violations?" He consults his clipboard like it contains the secrets of the universe. "Unpermitted dock modifications, possible septic system issues, and questions about your property line boundaries." "My dock hasn't been modified in 15 years. My septic system was inspected and approved just last spring, and my property boundaries were surveyed when I bought the house 25 years ago." "Who filed these complaints?" "I'm not authorized to share that information, but I'll need to inspect your dock, your septic tank access, and walk your property lines." 3 hours later, he's found exactly what I expected him to find. Nothing. My dock meets all county specifications, my septic system is functioning properly, and my property markers are exactly where they've always been. "Everything looks fine, Mr. Harris. I'll file my report by end of business today." But something in his voice tells me there's more coming. "Is there a problem?" "No problem with your property, but I'm required to inform you that the county has received an application for emergency eminent domain proceedings concerning lake access properties." Emergency eminent domain. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emergency for what? "I don't have those details. You'd need to speak with the county administrator's office." After he left, I called Frank Wheeler immediately. "Yes, Frank, they're trying to take my property through eminent domain." "Slow down, Tom. What exactly did the inspector tell you?" I repeated the conversation word for word. Frank was quiet for a long time after I finished. "Tom, emergency eminent domain requires a compelling public interest, like a highway project or public safety issue. I can't imagine what justification they'd use for lake property, unless they're claiming it's for public access to the waterway." Jesus, that's exactly what they'd claim, isn't it? They create a fake water access crisis with their phony HOA regulations, then swoop in with an eminent domain solution that coincidentally clears the way for their commercial development. I spent the rest of Thursday afternoon driving around the lake, counting code enforcement trucks. Every lakefront property was getting the same treatment. Mrs. Patterson's house, the Hendersons, even Bill Morris. Systematic, thorough, coordinated. By evening, the phone calls started. First, Mrs. Patterson. "Tom, they're saying there might be problems with our property lines, something about the county needing to reclaim lake access." Then Bill Morris. "Tom, you hear about this eminent domain thing? My nephew Jake says his Aunt Karen is behind it somehow." Then the Hendersons. "Tom, we got a visit from someone claiming to represent potential buyers. Cash offers, quick closings, no inspections needed." Cash offers. The final piece of the puzzle. They weren't just using eminent domain as a threat. They were using it to drive down property values so they could buy us out cheap, then flip the land to their development company at full commercial rates. Friday morning, I'm standing on my dock with Rick Stone's papers in one hand and my phone in the other, calling every television station and newspaper within 50 miles. If the McGrath sisters wanted to play public relations games, it was time to play in the big leagues. But nobody wanted the story. "Property disputes happen all the time," one editor told me. "Call us back when there's actual news." That afternoon, my actual news arrived. A certified letter from the county. Notice of emergency eminent domain proceedings. Public hearing scheduled for Monday, 2 p.m. County Courthouse. Property owner attendance required. Monday. 3 days to prepare for a fight that would determine whether I kept my home or lost everything my family had built here. I sat on my porch that evening, holding Grandpa's medallion and looking out at the lake. Still peaceful, still beautiful, still mine for at least 3 more days. That's when I saw Bill Morris walking across my yard, moving faster than I'd seen him move in months. "Tom, you need to hear this. My nephew Jake, he just called me, scared out of his mind." Bill sat down on my porch steps, breathing hard. Karen McGrath offered him $5,000 to testify at Monday's hearing. She wants him to say he witnessed multiple safety violations around the lake, boats going too fast, people dumping trash in the water, dock structures that are hazards to navigation. All lies. Every word. But here's the thing, Tom. She also told him what happens if he doesn't cooperate. His Aunt Karen Bennett has connections at the construction company where Jake works. One word from her, and he loses his job. $5,000 to lie, or lose his job for telling the truth. For a 25-year-old kid trying to make rent, that's not really a choice at all. Did he take the money? Bill looked out at the lake, avoiding my eyes. "He took it, Tom. I'm sorry, but he took it." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like the calm that comes right before a storm. "Bill, how many other people do you think they've bought?" "I don't know. But Tom, there's one more thing. That public hearing on Monday, Karen McGrath is planning to pack it with supporters, people from outside the county who will testify about the need for better public access to recreational waterways. Fake cops, fake votes, fake witnesses. The McGrath sisters had turned corruption into an art form, but they'd made one mistake. They'd given me the weekend to figure out how to beat them at their own game. The medallion felt warm in my palm. Lakekeeper, 1967. Time to earn that title all over again. Because Monday wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about whether ordinary people could still fight back when the system gets rigged against them. And I was about to show them what happens when you corner a man who's got nothing left to lose. Monday morning, 2 hours before the hearing, I'm sitting in my truck outside the county courthouse with a cardboard box full of documents. Rick Stone's construction plans, the original 1987 property maps, photographs of the fake surveying, and a list of every lie the McGrath sisters had told over the past 2 weeks. But I also had something else, something they didn't know I had. Saturday night, I'd driven to Jake Morris's apartment, found him sitting on his front steps, looking like a man who'd sold his soul and couldn't figure out how to buy it back. "Jake, that $5,000 isn't worth what it's going to cost you." He wouldn't look at me. "I need the money, Mr. Harris, and I need my job." What if I told you there was another way? That's when I showed him Rick Stone's documents, the real timeline, the fake HOA votes, the eminent domain scam, everything the McGrath sisters had planned from the beginning. "Jake, they're not paying you to lie at a hearing. They're paying you to help them steal my house and every other house on that lake, including your Uncle Bill's." It took him an hour to understand what he'd gotten mixed up in. It took him another hour to decide what he was going to do about it. Now, walking up the courthouse steps, I could see the McGrath sisters through the glass doors. They were dressed like they were attending a funeral, which, from their perspective, they probably were. My funeral. The hearing room was packed, just like Bill Morris had predicted. 40 or 50 people I'd never seen before, all wearing little blue stickers that said, "Public access now." Karen McGrath's out-of-town supporters, ready to testify about the urgent need for lake access reform. I took a seat in the back row, same as always. The cardboard box sat on the floor beside me, like a loaded weapon. County Administrator Williams called the hearing to order and read the eminent domain petition. Emergency public access to recreational waterways. Compelling public interest. Property acquisition necessary to serve the greater good. It all sounded very official and very reasonable if you didn't know what was really going on. Karen McGrath stood up first, looking like she was accepting an award instead of trying to steal my house. "This lake has been essentially privatized by a small group of residents who've blocked public access for decades," she told the room. "The county has a responsibility to ensure equal recreational opportunities for all citizens." She talked for 10 minutes about environmental protection and public rights and community responsibility. She had charts and graphs and a PowerPoint presentation that made it sound like I was single-handedly destroying the lake ecosystem by throwing a fishing line in the water. Then came the parade of witnesses. One after another, Karen McGrath's supporters stood up and testified about the urgent need for public boat launches and better lake access. They talked about their children being denied the right to enjoy nature, about economic development opportunities being blocked by selfish property owners. It was a beautiful performance. If I hadn't known it was all lies, I might have been convinced myself. Jake Morris was supposed to be witness number 12. When Administrator Williams called his name, Jake stood up in the middle of the packed hearing room, walked to the front, and looked directly at Karen McGrath. "Ma'am, I can't do this." The room went dead quiet. Karen McGrath's face went white. "Jake, we discussed your testimony. You have important information about safety violations around the lake." "No, ma'am, I don't. I've never seen any safety violations. I've never seen any environmental problems. And I've never seen any reason why Mr. Harris or anyone else shouldn't be allowed to fish their own lake." Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, setting it on the table in front of Administrator Williams. "That's $5,000 cash that Ms. McGrath gave me to lie at this hearing. I'm returning it, and I'm here to tell the truth instead." The explosion of voices that followed probably could have been heard 3 blocks away. Karen McGrath was on her feet, shouting about conspiracy theories and vindictive neighbors. Her supporters were demanding that Jake be removed from the hearing. Administrator Williams was banging his gavel like he was trying to drive nails. That's when I stood up. "Administrator Williams, I have some documents the committee needs to see." I walked to the front of the room with my cardboard box, feeling 40 years of anger and frustration and determination in every step. When I reached the table, I set the box down and looked out at the crowd. "My name is Tom Harris. I've lived on that lake for 25 years, and everything you've heard here today is a lie." I pulled out Rick Stone's construction plans first, spreading them across the table like I was dealing cards. "These are the real plans for our lake, not public access, not environmental protection. A $40,000 commercial resort that the McGrath sisters intend to build after they force all the current residents to sell their homes." The room erupted again, but this time the voices were different. Confused instead of angry, questioning instead of supportive. I pulled out the original 1987 property maps next. "These are the original development agreements for Lakeshore Drive. Every homeowner already has guaranteed water access that cannot be revoked by association SUT or county action." Then came the photographs of the fake surveying, the timeline of the manufactured crisis, the list of people who'd been paid to support the eminent domain petition. This entire hearing is based on a manufactured emergency designed to clear the way for private commercial development. The McGrath sisters created the problem they're asking you to solve. I saved the best for last. From the bottom of the cardboard box, I pulled out Grandpa's brass medallion and set it on the table where everyone could see it. This belonged to my grandfather, lake keeper, 1967. He earned this working for the county, making sure our waterways stayed clean and accessible to everyone who needed them. I picked up the medallion and held it so the light caught the inscription. He taught me that some things don't have a price tag. Some things can't be bought or sold or stolen with fake paperwork and rigged votes. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight looks hopeless. The hearing room was completely quiet now. Even Karen McGrath had stopped talking. "You want to take my house to serve the greater good? Fine. But make sure it really is the greater good you're serving, and not just the greater profit of 2 women who think they can buy whatever they want, including county officials and public hearings." Administrator Williams stared at the document spread across his table for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face had the expression of a man who just realized he'd been played. This hearing is adjourned pending further investigation of the claims presented today. 3 months later, the McGrath sisters were facing fraud charges and their development company was in bankruptcy. The original property covenants were restored, the fake HOA regulations were thrown out, and every homeowner on the lake got their water access rights back. Jake Morris kept his job and used his $5,000 to take his girlfriend on a vacation to Florida. Bill Morris quit drinking and started volunteering with the county parks department. Mrs. Patterson organized a neighborhood potluck that actually brought everyone together for the first time in years. Me, I'm back on my dock every morning at 6:15, fishing with Grandpa's rod and wearing his medallion. The lake is as peaceful as it ever was, maybe more so. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes ordinary people can fight back against corruption and win. Sometimes doing the right thing actually makes a difference. But it only works if you're willing to stand up when everything looks hopeless, and fight for what's yours even when nobody else will fight with you. That's what late keepers do. That's what Grandpa taught me. That's what I'll teach my grandson when he's old enough to hold a fishing rod. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight looks impossible. Especially when the fight looks impossible.